Ever since Notre Dame's top-rated defensive commit Ivan Taylor flipped to Michigan, Irish fans have been in a bit of panic mode about recruiting. But should they be? Let's find out.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, and welcome into another edition of Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. And today is Wednesday, July 10th. And thank you for getting your day started right here by making this your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I graduated from Notre Dame in 2018, and now I'm a producer at Fox Sports. And this show is free and available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. If you are watching along on YouTube, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Or if you're listening to the podcast, please take a second, rate the show 5 stars, leave a nice review too. If you're feeling extra generous this morning, and subscribe there as well. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Okay, we got more recruiting coverage coming your way today. On Monday night, I posted a new episode with my instant reaction to Ivan Taylor's decision to flip his commitment from Notre Dame to Michigan and how the commitment of another highly touted safety, getONE Blair, plays into all of that. So if you haven't listened to that one yet, go check that out once you're done here. But I wanted to continue the conversation with someone who is locked into the recruiting beat every single day, because I've seen a lot of different fan reaction on social media and message boards, and shocker, it was extremely negative. And there are a lot of fans who think the sky is falling, and while I think that there are certainly legitimate reasons to be concerned about Notre Dame recruiting, I wanted to get a better sense of the situation, and to help me out with that, I caught up with recruiting analyst Eric Thomas from Irish Illustrated. Check it out. All right, Eric, it seems hard to believe that just a few days after Notre Dame received a commitment from a highly rated prospect at a position of need, there are a lot of fans in panic mode as a result of Ivan Taylor's flip to Michigan and the uncertainty around a few guys who are scheduled to commit here in the coming weeks. But for me, I do think that there are very legitimate reasons to be concerned, but it's not quite as dire as some fans are making it out to be. So from your standpoint, how would you describe the state of Notre Dame football recruiting right now?
Yeah, look, the message boards are on fire, and folks are definitely upset. But look, it's still in a really healthy place, even amongst the defensive backs class. The loss of Taylor takes them from an elite class with 4 top 200 guys down to 3. That's still something that I think our Insider podcast noted that Notre Dame hasn't done in like a decade. So there's still a significant amount of talent in this class. The top 100 talent is still sort of floating in the air, which is where a lot of this uncertainty is sort of coming from. But overall, I think Notre Dame recruiting is still in a healthy place, although it is fair to say it's not in as good of a spot as maybe we were hoping probably just a few weeks ago. Some of that optimism has just not really materialized.
And that's sort of the ebbs and flows of the recruiting calendar. Like in June, you have all these guys take their official visits. They have a great time. They saw the right things afterwards. Then other schools have a chance to do the same thing with them. And then sort of water finds its level a little bit. And then you're in a dogfight with a bunch of guys. But last time I had you on, we were both on the same page about Ivan Taylor. And this was like right after the news broke that he was going to visit Alabama. There was a chance he was going to visit Florida. We knew about a visit that was going to happen with Michigan. And once he started visiting other schools and said publicly that it needed time to make a, quote, final call, we both considered him an uncommitted prospect. Now it's official. He's going to play for Michigan. And to me, the only surprising thing about this ordeal is the timing. Like, we thought this could play well into the fall, but that just didn't happen. I talked about it on my show a couple of days ago. I don't think it's coincidence that Taylor made this move just a couple of days after getONE Blair, another highly ranked player who plays Taylor's position, committed to Notre Dame. Now, I could be wrong there. So what's your understanding of the timeline and really everything that went into Taylor's decision to flip to Michigan?
Sure. I can't speak too much to, the process on his side or the thought process, but what I can say is it seems like this is a recruitment that really, as soon as Chris O'Leary left, was based on touch points. There was immediate instability. Like the moment he left, there was a perceived sense of, okay, this could be a problem. And it seemed to die down when he was on campus for the spring game. He was in South Bend, surrounded by coaches and players. He leaves. We think things are settled, or at least that's the impression that was coming out of the Goog. And then obviously some visits are announced, including that he's in Tuscaloosa. Oh no. So it kind of goes back and forth. At that point, we talked about it. it was hard for me to think that Ivan Taylor was going to end up at Notre Dame at that point. When you get a sense of stability in something like this that is once again put to the test, it's very rare that that person is going to end up circling back and ending up in your class. At the time, I thought Florida was probably the biggest threat just because they're right down the road. You can go take 100 visits into the fall, but ultimately, I think he got enough of what he wanted answered from his visit to Michigan. And he was removed enough, especially with Michigan coming after his visit to Notre Dame, from that initial influence that he seems to get when he's in South Bend, where things are normal and we're getting good signs. And I mean, we had sources in Florida and in South Bend telling us 4 days ago, that they thought a flip was still going to be a surprise. And then within like 12 hours, it was like, oh, he's actually going to go to Michigan. So, it's one of those things that evolves quickly. But I think he probably knew he was on his way out when O'Leary left. And really, Notre Dame was just doing everything it could to keep him on board. But it was really an effort in just extending the inevitable.
Yeah, O'Leary's influence here is really interesting because I'd been pretty critical about his ability to recruit guys because Notre Dame wasn't recruiting safety really well. Now, they did have Peyton Bowen committed for basically the entire length of the recruiting cycle before he ultimately flipped.
Almost.
So, yeah, exactly. So a lot of almost for Notre Dame at safety, but they were able to land Jadon Blair. And I think one thing that you hear recruits say about the Notre Dame coaching staff all the time is that they're very honest with you during the recruiting process. Like, obviously, they're going to exaggerate some things to make the school and the situation look as good as possible. This isn't even Marcus Freeman's staff, but one of my favorite stories all time about Notre Dame recruiting is that there's a coach, I'm not going to say his name on air, he's not at Notre Dame, so it doesn't really matter that much. They told Dexter Williams that it doesn't rain or it doesn't snow in South Bend. So obviously some things sort of get lost in recruiting, but I do believe that the Notre Dame coaching staff is brutally honest with these prospects about their standing, their place on the board for Notre Dame, how they are going to recruit at that position. So I don't think Taylor could possibly be surprised that Blair committed to Notre Dame, especially knowing that Notre Dame has to replace both safeties at the position next year. So I think that they're going to be aggressive trying to get another safety to fill Ivan Taylor's spot. Do you agree? Do you think that they're going to try to find a third safety in this class, or are they pretty content with Blair and Long?
I don't know how aggressive they'll be in the 2025 class specifically for a couple of reasons. One, and I say aggressive with scholarship safeties in mind. Brandon Logan is a kid who has a preferred walk-on offer. He also has a scholarship baseball offer. He's a little undersized. I was watching his film today. He's really athletic. He's a guy who, if they want to have a low-risk value add that's young, he might represent the most tangible path forward for them to do that in 2025. But we talked about on our podcast today, it is in the back half, but the propensity of available starting safety wide receiver talent is higher than any other position. Like, those are the ones where guys go in. It's harder to replace like corners. It's harder to replace.
You mean in the transfer portal?
Yeah, excuse me, in the transfer portal. Those are the most common positions you can grab starting level talent from and replace. So ultimately, for me, I don't know that there's so much of an impetus to get anyone in 2025 unless there's a specific sort of fit. Kevin threw out Brandon Hillman, which obviously went really well until it didn't. Hopefully something with a better ending than that could materialize, but I don't think they're going to be willing to throw out offers to anyone. And I don't have a sense that a football scholarship offer for Logan is imminent. It's definitely being discussed. It's difficult to get a sense of how quickly they want to action that versus give him a chance to, play out his senior season or whatever else.
Yeah. And if Brandon Hillman doesn't work out, maybe they can just look at Amorion Walker as well. Another Michigan guy who, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he went into the transfer portal and then he was going to go to Ole Miss and then he ended up back at Michigan.
Yeah. I don't remember if he ever actually, he may have enrolled in Oxford for a bit and then transferred back. I don't remember, but that one was a very long, drawn out, painful on signing day process.
If you followed his high school recruiting, nothing about that whole timeline there with the transfer portal and going to Ole Miss and Michigan, none of that would be a surprise. But he was a receiver coming out of high school. Doesn't play receiver at the college level. But let's talk about Notre Dame's wide receivers and the guys that they're going after, because you and I have talked about this before. I've been on record saying that I believe this is the biggest weakness in Notre Dame's class of 2025. They've got 2 wide receivers committed right now in Elijah Burris and Jerome Bettis Jr., but Bettis could end up switching over defensive back. As a matter of fact, that seems more likely by the day. The top targets left on the board for Notre Dame at wide receiver are 5-star Derek Meadows and 4-stars Dylan Robinson and Tanu Hines. Each one of these guys is expected to make their commitment in the next couple of weeks. Derek Meadows actually announced that he's going to be making his commitment on Saturday. So once it's all said and done, where do you think these guys are going?
I think Meadows is going to join the Tide. Seems to be where things are trending. I do think Robinson will actually end up in Notre Dame. There was a big surge of Irish confidence a couple of weeks ago, and then that sort of tumbled into, okay, we think this might be coin flip territory. And I got that from sources around Notre Dame and in Westwood. It now seems, per Tom Loy's update late last night, that Notre Dame may have sort of grabbed the steering wheel here. So I do think they're going to land Dylan Robinson. Tanu Hines is probably Notre Dame, maybe USC. I don't think Texas is going to give him the green light enough to be a factor as much as we've talked about it. They have another kid they like on the board more. He was supposed to commit this week before Hines. He's delayed his announcement twice because of the inclement weather in the Houston area. So now his date is probably going to end up taking place after Tanu Hines commits. I don't think Texas is going to jump into the ring in time to make an impact.
Okay, let's talk about Dylan Robinson because last time I had you on, you said that you thought he was best suited to play safety, and I think Washington and UCLA would agree with you. Notre Dame, on the other hand, wants him to play wide receiver. Do you think that his decision will ultimately come down to just whether he wants to play offense or defense?
Somewhat. I actually had a chance to interview and talk with him. He's a really thoughtful kid. I think some of that matters to him, but he didn't really give me a sense that it was a preference. It was more about where does he see the best opportunity to play early potentially, but the best path to develop at his specific position. That was kind of how he phrased it to me. At Notre Dame, there is a pretty clear path for a 6'3" boundary receiver who can jump really high. So that does sort of bode well for him joining there. I think the biggest thing is that Notre Dame sort of impressed him as a brand early on. And the fact that they've been able to create so much substance in front of him, I think that's why they're trending the right way. He wants to study product design, and they've already talked about paths forward for him to do that and how he can set up that education at Notre Dame. He's really interested in potentially being a two-way player. And although UCLA and Washington were a little bit more open about that, like, yeah, you'll be a defensive back and then we'll probably throw you the ball sometimes. Notre Dame has talked to him like, hey, look, if the opportunity is there, as I smack my mic, if the opportunity is there, we will allow you to get some run at safety, as needed or whatever. He told me that conversation has happened. So I think at this stage for him, it really is just about where does he want to go and what offers him the best platform to develop in any one direction. And it looks like Notre Dame is going to win out on that front.
Well, hey, if Notre Dame is open to letting guys play both ways, I hope they keep that same energy with Dallas Golden, because I've been pitching that since the moment that he committed to Notre Dame. I just think he's so exciting to watch. But let's talk about Tanu Hines. What's your scouting report on him? Because I like him as a prospect. He would certainly be better than nothing, and I think that nothing is a realistic possibility for Notre Dame at the wide receiver position, which we'll get to in a second. But I think there are some red flags there, specifically Texas's complete lack of interest in him at this point, especially considering he's not far from there. They need a wide receiver. So what do you think of him as a prospect?
I really like Tanu Hines' speed. I like his physicality to go up and get the ball. And I think for a player of his size and really for his athletic background, you don't really think of like fast 6'1" players that are especially tough. But I think that's a great word to describe his play style. That being said, I don't think he's necessarily as versatile in what he can do as a guy like John Anthony Hall, as an athletic freak like Derek Meadows, or even like Dylan Robinson can. And I don't necessarily mean that he can't move positions. Like Tanu Hines is flexible enough to play in the slot and outside, but Tanu Hines to this point isn't a guy who's going to attack all areas of the field. He doesn't really have a big impact attacking the intermediate areas of the field. He's more of like a deep threat, and like he'll go underneath, find space, and he's just gone. So there's a little bit of like I don't want to call him a two-trick pony. He's better than that, but like there's a little bit of that sort of element to his game that does make him probably a more limited ceiling. Whereas a guy like Derek Meadows could be a wide receiver one. I think Dylan Robinson can probably be a wide receiver one, although I don't know that I'm quite as high on him jumping out at that level as some of my colleagues here at Irish Illustrated. But like, I don't think Tanu Kynes has that ceiling. I think Tanu Kynes is like at best like a solid college wide receiver too, and you still need those, and you should still go for them. But it does seem like a little bit of a bummer if he ends up being the second highest ranked receiver prospect when Derek Meadows was just right there the whole time.
Is it fair to say that you see some Rico Flores in his game, who I liked? I'm not going to pretend that I didn't like Rico Flores now that he's at UCLA, but they're kind of similar to me.
Yeah. I think Flores is probably not quite as fast, but more just like explosive in and out of his breaks. And he's probably a little bit more complete when it comes to just like tough, physical, gonna go get the ball. Flores was something else, man. I'm really bummed that he's gone because he's a ton of fun to watch. Flores was almost like a combination of like the best parts of John Anthony Hall's game with Tanu Kynes. Just that he has that explosiveness, and somehow, some way, he'll jump up over a safety that looks like the same height as him, and he looks like he's twice as high. Like, he just made those plays in high school. That's who Rico Flores was. He didn't look like it all the time, but there was just these highlight level plays where it's like, that's nuts, dude. He's so explosive. Rico's different, man. He was too good.
We'll be right back with Eric to get his insight about some uncertainty about the linebacker position in Notre Dame's class of 2025. But first, I wanted to tell you about FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. When I look at Notre Dame's struggles attracting top wide receiver talent, specifically Derek Meadows, like at this point, it seems like a foregone conclusion. He's not going to Notre Dame. As a matter of fact, they might finish third in this recruitment. I believe that's what Tom Loy from 24/7 Sports said on a post recently. And I think, a lot of it has to do with the fact that they simply have not produced or developed well enough at that position for a really long time. And look, there's plenty of blame to go around for all the reasons why Notre Dame has struggled there. But how much do you think that plays into why they've struggled to land good receivers in this class and previous classes as well?
Yeah, legacy and pedigree is so important. Like, you see what Ohio State does in the trail. I know it's not fair to compare anyone to them because they've just been on like an unparalleled heater the last few years. But you look at classes like that, and Georgia's grabbing all these top guys, and Alabama grabs top guys every year now. Like, these traditionally run-heavy offenses at the top of the sport, moving more towards vertical offenses at the levels they're recruiting, it really does put a strain on schools like Notre Dame to try and add these guys because for whatever reason, it seems like wide receiver is a position where collections of talent are more willing to go with one another, whereas with some other positions, if there's two top-ranked corners in a class, the third guy, Ohio State just experienced this. The third guy's like, I don't want to go be cornerback 3 there. I'm really good. I want to go somewhere where I'm the number 1 guy. Wide receivers, you get some of that, but there's more willingness to group up, especially with schools where they feel like there's a championship chance. And it makes it tough for Notre Dame when you don't have that same, like, yeah, look at X number of top 50 picks we have in the last 5 years. And it's like just Chase Claypool and Miles Boykin. Like, yeah, it changes things. Actually, I don't think either were top 50 now that I think back. But it's not the same. And it makes it tough, and it makes it difficult for them as well that they have had a decent bit of transition at the wide receiver coach over this period where the roster has been kind of tough. So it feels like they're constantly like, okay, we're in a hole. We need to figure out how to fill the hole and just like get back to neutral. And they make strides towards it, and then they find themselves in a hole again. And they fire that guy, the new guy comes in, and we're just in a little bit of this cycle. And it takes one guy to really break it. Chauncey Stuckey did it a little bit on the recruiting trail. He gave Mike Brown a couple good freshmen to work with, and obviously, the foundations of whatever the transfer class ended up being, although I think most folks would credit Brown with that more. But, ultimately, it's just a tough position when you can't point to NFL talent. Because these 5-star receivers, man, all of them think they're going to the league. And Notre Dame just hasn't been the most viable path. Rico Flores said it himself. I want to go somewhere where I can win the Biletnikoff. He didn't feel like he could do it at Notre Dame. And I don't think that's a dissimilar feeling to some of these recruits. Mike Denbrock hopefully changes it, but that's the playing field right now. You got to prove it.
It's hard to blame him, too. I mean, if that's really what his end goal is in college, winning the Biletnikoff. Now, I would say, does he have a great shot at UCLA without Jim Kelly? Probably not, but that is neither here nor there. I think there's going to be a lot of eyes on Notre Dame's offense from, high school prospects around the country. Like, what is Notre Dame's offense going to look like this year? Because I still think they're going to be run heavy, but they don't necessarily need like Jaden Greathouse to get 1,200 yards, but there needs to be some serious production out of that group. But looking at it in this class, if Notre Dame goes 0 for 3 with Meadows, Robinson, and Hines, and that seems like a legitimate possibility, even though Robinson feels like a Notre Dame lean right now, there's still plenty of time for that to change. Meadows seemingly out. Hines also, there's some momentum about him going to USC. Like, where does Mike Brown go from here? Because there's still like almost 5 months left in the recruiting cycle, so they have time, but obviously they'd have to make up some ground with whoever they go after next.
Yeah, I wrote about this a few days ago. In terms of goodwill going into the season, if he goes 0 for 3, it's gone. Like, the benefit of the doubt for the early part of his tenure is gone, and it will have to be made up with just standout performances throughout the season, which, just like you said, if you're kind of going for, like, we have a collection of talent more than a standout talent, it's very hard for him to get that benefit of the doubt back until the 2026 class. And it's not really clear what's happening there either. So I'm not concerned yet. We're getting there.
Yeah, he hasn't been around long enough to be like, this guy sucks.
Depending on what happens by August 1st with these 2025 guys and any sort of tangible momentum with wide receivers at like the, what do they call it, the grill and chill on July 25th in the South Bend after the dead period ends. If there's momentum with wide receiver in 25 and 26, committed prospects, new guys on the board that look like they're legitimately like going to be, taking Notre Dame to the final 3 or whatever it is for them, then I think it's more just like, okay, I'm curious. Where do we go from here? How do we evolve? And that's where I'm at now. I think if Notre Dame goes 0 for 3, you're automatically concerned. If Notre Dame goes 1 for 3 and there's no momentum in 2026, you're still concerned. Because at the end of the day, like, this is a position that the scars have not healed from what this looked like when it was real bad, when it was at its worst.
The Duke game?
Yeah, and for Mike Brown to come in, and even if so many of the factors around this are outside his control, which is what I wrote about, like, it's not necessarily all his fault what cards he was dealt, but you got to play the hand you were dealt. And right now, it does not look like they're being played very well. Now, that could change in the next 2 weeks, and we could have a very different impression. But for the moment to moment, it's definitely something where I'm really curious about where they go, because there's a lot of good receivers in the portal. You can build with, flexing out the top end of your roster, but end of the day, they need to land these top guys and build them in-house if they want to be at the top of the sport. That's what's been proven even in the portal era, is you need to have in-house talent built from the ground up. And there's just not enough volume of that at Notre Dame.
I know, it's so crazy too, because when I was growing up, I felt like Notre Dame, for all their struggles during the Willingham and Weiss era, like, they did have a great run of an elite wide receiver. I mean, hell, they had Jeff Samardzija, Maurice Stovall, McKnight, and then that led into like
Michael Floyd, Golden Tate.
Michael Floyd, Golden Tate. Like, they had a really great run, and then Will Fuller. Like, that seems like so long ago because of the struggles at the position. But maybe one day soon they'll figure it out. All right, let's flip it over to the defense, because at one point it seemed like a done deal that Notre Dame was going to land elite linebacker Madden Framo out of Southern California. But the longer he waits to make his decision, the less likely it feels that he picks Notre Dame. And it's not like he's come out and said or done anything that makes you think that Notre Dame is out of it. I don't think that's the case at all here. But what has happened with his recruitment since he took his official visit, and where do you think stand with him today?
Yeah, so he took his visit to Notre Dame. Things went very well. We definitely were sort of like, oh, we could commit at any moment, even on our side of things. Ohio State canceled his visit. They felt that they were too far behind Notre Dame and Texas, and I think even Washington at that point, to really want to put the effort in, and they put those efforts into Riley Pettyjohn, Nathaniel Uso-Boateng, and a few others.
And it worked out with Pettyjohn.
Yes, it did. They got their man. So Madden Framo at that point, we were thinking, okay, he's probably going to cancel Texas and commit. Doesn't happen. He takes an unofficial to USC earlier in the week, then he goes to Austin. USC is not really a factor in this, from what I'm gathering. They continue to get like FaceTime with him at the end of this, but it almost feels like it's the sense of like, I wish you guys had been a serious program before this, because they really only engaged him when the staff turned over. It's not like they weren't trying to recruit him before, but seriously engaged him. Like, this is a point of emphasis. So I don't know. It's a little bit unique that USC might get another visit before his decision. I still don't think they're going to be able to land him, but it does draw things out, which is a unique paradigm for a kid who was like, he's going to commit tomorrow kind of deal. I talked to some writers over at Horns 247 earlier this week, just trying to get a sense of some of these prospects that Notre Dame and Texas are going head to head for. And he said specifically that Madden Framo was the top linebacker on the board as far as he knew at this point. He had not had a chance to speak to staff since Pettijohn had decided to leave the state and go to Ohio State. But the sense around Austin that they were getting was that Notre Dame was still in the lead. Visit went very well in Austin, nothing but good things to say, Notre Dame's still in the lead. So it sounds like it's still in a good place. I haven't moved my prediction off of Notre Dame, and frankly, I don't think I will. It's a little bit unnerving when things draw out like this, but I think this one still ends up with Notre Dame.
Notre Dame is in the mix for another elite linebacker that we've talked about a lot, Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng. Personally, I've got no idea where he's going to end up. He certainly likes the recruitment process. I think that's fair to say. And I honestly don't see him putting an end to it anytime soon. Like, even if he makes a commitment, I don't think that's going to be the end-all, be-all of his recruitment. Like, I'm going to wait until he signs the dotted line in December for me to be convinced that whichever school he commits to is actually where he's going to go. When do you expect he'll make an announcement into which school?
So I thought I had a good idea, and then everything got thrown apart. So following his Notre Dame official visit, he told Irish Illustrated's Kevin Sinclair, my colleague, that he was planning to move up his commitment. Originally, he thought he was going to commit towards the end of his season, maybe afterwards. Kind of didn't say it out loud, but it seemed like maybe he was going to be like one of the All-America Bowl commits kind of kids. And then he told Kevin Sinclair, he's like, look, I'm going to take the rest of my visits. We're going to see if anyone can top Notre Dame. I've been talking to my family. We're probably going to commit before the season. Just get it out of the way. That's what we've been talking about. Cool. Great. Nice and tidy. We're moving it up. Ohio State lands Pettijohn. There is news that they could still take one more linebacker, but they're looking for like a jack hybrid, which is like in their 4-2-5 defense. It's a guy who can rotate down to defensive end without changing personnel. That's not a 6-foot linebacker. So they're probably out on him. Right now, realistically, it looks like it's between Notre Dame and Michigan, with USC just like right behind is kind of what I'm gathering. The main thing that threw me, though, is I think it was 2 days ago, USCFootball.com, our 24/7 sports affiliate for the Trojans, wrote that he was now talking about committing in October again. So it could be drawn out, and after his season, committing after his season, and that he would take an official visit to Florida in October. I hadn't heard that. I still haven't been able to confirm it on my side. So I'm trying to figure out what to do with this report, because I can't tell if it's actually based on old reports that stated something similar or if it was from his conversation with him. So that's something I'm just trying to verify on my side. I would hazard a guess that he'll probably do it during the course of his season. IMG typically kicks off early, like end of August, early September. So it could be then. I just don't think he's going to announce before his season based on what I'm hearing most recently. But if that USC report is based on older information, he could still announce earlier. But I don't know. There was a lot of momentum for Notre Dame. Michigan definitely felt good. But even amidst some of the hype and the momentum that Michigan felt it was building, I was still hearing a lot of good things about Notre Dame. It feels like some of that confidence maybe has died down. I don't know if that's because of like a lack of confidence, or if it's just because like it continues to draw out. So for them, it's like reaching a point where they're like, okay, well, we don't really know, so we're not going to signal confidence. I don't really know, but I still think Notre Dame is right there at the top. I just don't know if it's necessarily in the driver's seat or if it's kind of a 1A, 1B race. It's a little bit tough to get into the nitty gritty with him.
The uncertainty certainly checks out with everything, with my entire perception of that. Yeah. Recruitment. But before we wrap things up here, I want to get your take on two more things, one good, one bad. Big picture, what do you think is the most concerning development for Notre Dame on the recruiting trail? It doesn't have to be specific to one position or even this class, just in general.
It's going to be wide receiver position. I know there's been much made about interior defensive line, but I don't really see the plan at wide receiver in 2026 visualizing outside of Faison right now. I don't really see a natural pivot point for what looks like it could be a miss or two from the top 3 remaining targets in 2025. It's a lot of question marks.
Okay. Let's end this on a good note here. What are you most optimistic about when it comes to Notre Dame recruiting? Let's get the fans excited on the way out.
Linebacker and defensive back. Oh my gosh. I know everyone is going to be upset because Ivan Taylor just ducked out of the class, stuttering. But man, Mike Mickens is the man. I from afar, I just really respect how much he's turned this room around from where it was when I worked as an assistant for a particular former coach. Look, it's 3 top 200 defensive back recruits is not something they've done in a long time. And he's just building on adding guys with length. Morrison was a guy that they were able to identify that Alabama didn't want to take. So he went to Notre Dame, and look how good he is. Like, you're able to find these wins and you're able to find these evaluations early on and just hammer these guys that they belong in South Bend. I am very bullish on Mike Mickens in that group. And then linebacker, you see the young talent. Even if they get one of Faremo and Owusu Boateng, if they get both, great. Either way, the high-level talent and the versatility of the young talent in that group is among the best in the country, and it cannot be overstated. I guess the honorable mention here is quarterback. It's a great group. I'm probably more bullish on the other ones just because Deuce Knight hasn't signed on the dotted line, although I still believe he will. But those are probably the top 3.
All right, you can check out all of Eric's work on Irish Illustrated, as well as recruiting podcast Tracking the Trail that he does with Kevin Sinclair. Eric, thanks for doing this, especially on such short notice. Let's do it again soon once these guys have all made their decisions, and hopefully the sky won't be falling anymore.
Yeah, hopefully I'll have some more positive updates for you. But thanks again, Tyler. It's always a pleasure.
All right, that is going to do it for today's episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. I've talked a lot about recruiting this week, so tomorrow I'm going to do a deep dive on the Notre Dame receiver room. Heading into 2024, it will be the 3rd installment of my position breakdown series as we get closer and closer to the season. We're just 3 weeks away from the start of fall camp. So be sure to tune into that tomorrow. Also, please subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast, and I'll see you then.